This is The End in Mind, Season 2, Episode 7.
Welcome to The End in Mind. Today's episode is going to have us reversing roles just a little bit, but our topic is going to be on the older woman, not the other woman, the older woman and the need for mentorship. And this is a topic where Danielle has a lot of wisdom, so we're going to reverse roles today. I'm going to be asking her some questions. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Bring it on.
All right.
Mentoring is a passion of mine. I really have it in my life mission statement, and I'm very excited about it, so I'm ready.
Good. Well, you know, this word mentorship is kind of a buzzword right now, too. What exactly is a mentor?
I think, you know, I grew up in the church, and years ago we called it discipleship. But that word got distorted quite a bit.
Yeah.
And people started thinking of discipleship as sitting through a class where they were learning the Bible. And it really didn't capture the essence of walking relationally, intimately with someone who had walked in our season of life before.
Yes.
And walking us through that. And so I think it's just someone who walks beside us in life, who's in tune with the details of our life, that we can really talk with and get direction and get affirmation and get I say a lot that the power in mentorship is in the affirmation and not necessarily the correction. Yes, a mentor, when I have that, is redirecting me.
Right.
They're going, oh, you know, maybe you want to switch course here. Well, this doesn't really line up with your priorities, or and they'll provide that objectivity. But really, what has changed my life in the mentoring relationships that I've had and what I have seen changes other people's lives is just the affirmation. It's just the confidence that somebody who has gone before is going, yes, you're doing well. You're going to be fine.
Gotcha.
This, you are good at this. Stay the course.
Right.
And so I think just finding someone in a season of life that has already been through that season spiritually or even practically. You know, we, at this point in my life, my husband and I both, we tend to find very topic specific mentors.
Yes.
Instead of having just one person that's walking through life with us, we have business mentors, we have spiritual mentors, we have relational mentors for marriage.
Right.
You know, we have different people in our life that fill that role. But anyone who has walked before us through the season that we're in and can give guidance, affirmation, and wisdom.
Now, you've said several times, anybody that's walked ahead of us, that's been through that season before. One thing I've noticed is that we tend to want to go to people that are going through the same thing at the same time, so that we can not necessarily have discipleship or mentorships, but more commiserating.
Yes.
And so, do you think that is a very important aspect of mentorship?
I mean, I do. I know people define it differently, but I really do, because, and this gets a little touchy sometimes, but when I mentor, I teach younger women that there needs to be a clear authority in a mentoring relationship. You have the mentor and you have the mentee.
Yes.
And it needs to be entered into with a complete understanding that this person has the authority to speak into our life and be used of God to bring truth and to bring perspective.
Gotcha.
And so I really feel like peer relationships are not necessarily, not that we can't learn from peers,
Right.
but that they're not necessarily mentoring relationships, that it needs to be very clear in those relationships who is the mentor and who is the mentee. And both parties really need to enter into that relationship agreeing to that fact. That's what
That
I
makes
found to be the
sense.
most effective.
So, you know, there are some people that would say, I don't really need a mentor. You know, I can find the answers. I'm independent, I live in the West. We are fiercely independent. So why do I need one?
Well, if someone were to say to me, I don't need a mentor, I would question their ability to be transparent. I would say, what are you afraid of and what are you guarding?
Yeah.
Because honestly, I think it is a little bit intimidating sometimes. I also think that sometimes we have the wrong perception of what it is.
Right.
And although that person may have authority, you've given them willingly, you've submitted to their input, it doesn't always mean that they have all the answers. And we don't need to go into it expecting that person to have all the answers, or or being uncomfortable with the fact that we have to take everything they say.
Right.
And so, I think when people bring that up, I would say that would be a red flag for me.
Like,
Where,
come on,
like, we all need it.
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
I mean, definitely, I would say as I've gotten older, I would say that I'm in a season now where, I'll say this. When we were in 7th grade, it was a requirement of my parents that we be in a mentoring relationship, starting in 7th grade, with an older woman in our community that they had a good relationship with.
Oh,
and it was
interesting.
a partnership. So they would talk with that person, and when they would feel like there were some things in our lives that needed to be addressed, but that we might hear better from someone else. They wanted a lot of voices in our life reaffirming the biblical principles that they were teaching us. And so we were required. So I've had a lot of experience with having been mentored by a lot of very different kinds of women. At this point in my life, I don't necessarily have a need for that one person. I think I've kind of crossed over into the older woman. Just in the last couple years, it feels that way. I sense that I don't have the same kind of need now. Like I said before, we go very need specific to look for guidance and mentoring, both my husband and I, and then us as a couple. But definitely, I think we always need perspective, no matter how old we are, and we can always learn. But I definitely think that for younger women who are, teenagers, young adults, single, young married, raising children while they're still majorly in their reproductive years and child training years, it's pretty essential to have one person that's like the main
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, I'm feeling pretty much the same way, and yet I'm facing some new stages of life that I would love to be able to specifically find, okay, as you transitioned into empty
How do I do
nest,
this?
or as you transitioned into elder care, how did you, that, so.
Well, we were talking in the car yesterday, driving up here. I jumped in with you, and you gave me that look like, okay, what's coming?
I know.
And I'm like, okay, I've got some questions because you're just ahead of me,
Right.
And so, and you and John have headed in a direction that Kevin and I see ourselves heading.
Right.
So that's where, we go and we specifically go, okay, we see in John and Lori that they're living some of the things that we're headed toward. Let's just get some input and perspective. How do you do this? What does it look like?
Important.
So, and I think from my experience, it's a much more effective thing when the mentee is the one who initiates the relationship.
I do too.
But sometimes there'll be a season in life where I can see that a young woman needs it, and either is not equipped to ask, or is afraid to ask, or doesn't want to presume, or doesn't want to be a burden, or whatever. And so sometimes I'll just kind of open the door, or I'll just say, hey, let's go to lunch, and then at the end of lunch, if I felt like she was responding and it was valuable, I'll say, do you want to do this more often? And just kind of, so there are times when I will initiate that and open the door, but I think mostly it's great when I'm approached specifically.
Gotcha.
It's good.
Now, you've mentioned several areas of life that we can, ask for mentorship in, that you sought membership in. So I'm going to ask you to expound on that. What areas of life can we look for mentorship in, or should we look for mentorship?
Well, and I think this goes into who do we look for, what do we look for in a mentor? I think this might sound very contrary to what you might expect. I think sometimes, like you were saying, we look for someone who's going through the same thing that we are in life to commiserate. I think when it comes to mentoring, sometimes we look for people that are a lot like us. And I have learned that the most valuable thing is to look for someone who is strong in areas that I'm weak.
Right.
So I will specifically say, okay, in this season of my life, I know I need to grow in this area, and I will look for a woman who is really strong in that. Now, sometimes that means I don't relate to her as well, and that we don't it's not like that click thing.
Right.
But if I know going in that this is what I'm looking for, it has been so valuable to me to have women in my life, and you'd be surprised that there's a clicking that happens in another way as you grow in that relationship. That it might not be like just a kindred from the beginning, but when I see those qualities in that person and I'm looking for it. The other thing I want to say about this is, and this this is tough. This is something that I kind of go around about with my children, and I'm trying to really instill in them and help to explain to them. Sometimes we see the weaknesses of people, and we discount their strengths in other area and their ability to mentor us in other areas. And I think that, and my husband and I went through this for several years. He really needed it, and I needed him to have it. And the reason I say that is because I want to be the wife. I want to respond. I want to be the one who soaks up the offering of the overflow of what God's doing in his life.
Right.
But if he doesn't have another man to speak into that and to ask him those questions and to have those discussions, I can't receive, because I have to be that only voice of wisdom and of objectivity and of perspective, and vice versa, you know.
Exactly.
So he needs me to be hearing from another woman, and I need him to be hearing from another man. And I think with, you know, sometimes we discount something that could be very valuable in someone simply because we see another area of their life where we maybe don't agree with their decisions or respect them.
Right.
So I think you really have to go, but what is it I'm looking for? And then be willing to let God use someone just in their area of strength, because that's the thing that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
So hope that's
Yes, that
answering the
answers
question.
it.
Good.
Well, you know, you've been talking about, you know, areas and types of mentorship, but my question is, what do you look for in a mentor? For me, when I'm looking for a mentor, I'm looking at somebody who kind of is in that area of life where I want to end up or where I want to journey to.
Which is starting with the end in mind.
Yeah, very clever.
It's a visual of the end. So yeah.
So if I look at their life and I'm not liking, you know, the way their family looks or the way their marriage is, I'm not going to them for marriage counseling or marriage mentorship. So what are you looking for? Give me some examples of what you've experienced.
Absolutely. I'll start with the most recent and work back. About 2.5 years ago, I had my husband's load with the creative production. We own a branding and creative communication agency. And his load was he had been carrying the load of administrative and financial and legal and corporate and all that, as well as the corporate. And we were growing, and he was getting a lot of work, and it just didn't make sense anymore for him to try to do both. And so I stepped in to take some of that load off of him and to kind of function as sort of a CFO, an HR department, and the corporate legal department.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I got quite the education.
Right.
But the way I got that education is through a couple of amazing mentors in our life. And it's very interesting because, of course, I was taught as a young girl, starting in 7th grade, that it needed to be a woman. This meant these two mentors in our life have been men.
Right.
And it's been a very amazing thing, because I have a man that is a semi-retired lawyer. I call him my lawyer dad, who is a godly man.
Oh, I've heard you talk about him.
Oh, he's precious. I just love him. And he's a lawyer dad to me, because he has come in and mentored me in the area of business.
Gotcha.
And so I meet with him right from our home on Skype. And I've only ever met him once in person. He's got kids and grandkids in Artios, and so he's got family, and so he's come down to see some shows and things like that. But mostly we just meet over the phone, and he stepped in, and occasionally Kevin will be a part of those discussions, but it's just tailored to mentoring the business aspect.
Gotcha.
But in doing so, he has provided all the things that I look for in a mentor, because he has come alongside me and affirmed me in my ability to do this job, because I'm definitely not naturally created this way.
Yeah, right.
He has totally challenged me in the areas when I'm weak, and just go, no, Danielle, you need to get this done and do this next. And then he's broken it down and put it into bite-sized chunks for me. He's come along and said, I'm going to look over your shoulder. This is such a security. I'm going to look over your shoulder at everything you're doing. You're going to do it. You're capable of doing it, and you're doing a great job.
Gotcha.
But I'm going to give you the security of the backup of saying, no, you're doing it correctly.
Right.
And when you're talking about a lot of money that you're managing in a business, and other people's money and clients, and and then the corporate legal things that can leave you exposed from a governmental standpoint and a tax standpoint, to have that security has been so amazing. And then my husband as well has a business mentor. He's actually part of a professional CEO mentoring group. And what an amazing thing that has been for him. It's a group of men who run businesses. They're all the CEOs of their businesses. And then the man that leads the group they have one day a month that they meet as a group, and they talk about business solutions, and they also talk about personal life and spiritual solutions. And
That's
so
great.
it's looking at the man as a whole person. They have each other, they work each other's issues, so there's this objectivity and this brainstorm
Right,
and creativity and brotherhood. But also, every man in that group gets John, the head, for a half day session every month. So Kevin has his one-on-one with John, and then he has the group, and John leads and facilitates
That's
that.
awesome.
And it has been so powerful. And there was about a couple months ago, because I've been working in partnership with Kevin in the business, we were kind of at a standstill in some issues where our marriage was affecting the business and their business was affecting the marriage. You know,
Yeah,
and,
been
and
there, done that.
so many times you can get spiritual mentoring in your church, and you can get business mentoring in the corporate world, but to have both in together is amazing, because they are so integrated when you own your own business and when you're working together as a couple. And John, I asked if I could go. I said, I know this is like the guy thing, you know, and this is your
Right.
mentor, but I just feel like he needs a perspective from me working as your partner and as your wife, and that he needs to hear from both of us what the issues are. So valuable. I mean, it
Wow.
was just so powerful. So
It's incredible.
so if that's the most recent
Yeah,
example,
absolutely.
obviously, as I was a young married woman, there were women in my life that mentored me, and just for then it was literally just pure encouragement, and just coming over and praying. I had this sweet woman, Bernadette, who I haven't talked to in years, because it was just for a season
Right.
that God put us in community together. But my children were small, and this is the funniest little story. We used to sit on my porch, and I worked at the farmer's market on Saturdays, and so I would bring home all the leftover vegetables from the farmers, and we'd make a big bowl of fresh salsa, gazpacho kind of stuff, just all the fresh vegetables, and we would eat that with chips every Friday afternoon, you know,
Right.
after the farmer's market. And she would just say, okay, what's going on in your life this week? And I would just tell her what my burdens were, and she would say, okay, let's just pray for it. We weren't sticking to a book. It wasn't a curriculum.
right,
it was
right.
just, this is what's going
Right,
on in my
I
life, and
agree.
how can I lift you up? And one week I said, I'm just struggling because I want to make my home beautiful, and we don't have any money at all. And she taught me, she literally took my grocery receipts and taught me how to save money in a way that then I could buy a candle. I mean, it was literally
Yeah.
that, you know, and she made me feel okay for buying that candle. She explained to me why that was a part of who God created me,
Yes,
that
absolutely.
making the home beyond just shopping for the groceries and providing the physical needs was an expression of who I was spiritually. It was worship. It was creating something for my family. It was, and so she just, and now I can't go to the grocery store and buy a candle without thinking about Bernadette, because she taught me so much in that, just that little practical thing.
That's awesome. Well, you know, I've got two more questions left for you. One is, how do you find a mentor? And the second one is, how do you be a mentor? So we're a little short on time, but
Yeah.
can you?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think
Okay.
I've addressed the how do you be one, you know,
Just by those people's examples.
yeah.
Listening to what you've been saying.
Yeah, and I think just being available, just watching and being available. This is a hard thing, because I know a whole lot of young women who are desperate for mentoring, and I don't know a whole lot of older women who are creating enough margin in their life to do it. And so, so finding them is hard. I'm not going to say that it's easy. I think you start at your church. I think you have to be bold enough to go and ask. You know, you really, and don't wait until you're desperate. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's too late when you're, you know, you might as well at that point go to counseling and pay a lot of money for
Yeah.
it. You know what
Pay
I
somebody
mean?
to listen to you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, but when you start to sense that need, you know, start to put your feelers out and just ask directly. I'm interested in mentoring. I need somebody to walk with me.
Right.
And I think, you know, your church, definitely from a professional standpoint, there are small business mentors available through the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
They're great about connecting business mentors, and you know, from a leadership standpoint, there are a lot of organizations who work with developing leaders and who do a lot of personal development and training.
Gotcha.
There are professional mentors out there that if you're in a position to pay for someone to do that, they're quite effective. One that we really appreciate is, his name is Pete Richardson, and he is he simply does life plans, and he has an organization and professional mentors that are certified by his organization to do life plans. And so you can pay for just a couple of days of really intense mentoring. So there are a lot of resources out there, and we can put some of that stuff on the End in Mind with the show notes, so that people know where to go for some of those things. But I mainly just think, for especially for young women who maybe aren't in that world per se, just to look around them and say, who would I like to be like? Look for older
That's
women.
the best question
Say,
to
who would I
ask.
like to be like? And then be flexible with it. Don't expect that they're going to have 2 hours every single week. Maybe they can do it once a month. Maybe it's dinner, or lunch once a month, or maybe it's just a few minutes each week. Maybe it's just a stand up. I just need a 15-minute phone call check-in, or it needs to look differently for everybody. But
And I think you answered the last question, how to be one, just by that, by making yourself available. Just make yourself available.
Absolutely.
And, I think I agree with you, there is a shortage of women who are willing or have the margin to be mentors, or they're done with this phase of life, and they're done, I'm done.
I got there. I can't believe it, because when I was a young married woman, I remember the desperation I felt, and I thought, oh my lands, how hard is this? They've been through this. They don't have kids at home anymore. How difficult can this be?
Right.
And then I moved into that season, and I forgot. And then recently the Lord convicted me. You need to stay in some homeschooling groups, because we educate our kids at home. We need to stay there, even though
but they
need me, and it's time to do that. And so
these are great thoughts, Danielle. Just great thoughts, and I would encourage our listeners to really think through these things, both from both perspective, being and finding a mentor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yep.